Well, thank you, Senator, for coming. I know it's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here. Great.
Let's begin. I'm a climate guy. Let's begin with your first run for the Senate in 2010. And you famously shot a rifle at Waxman Markey cap and trade bill in a campaign ad saying it was bad for West Virginia. Yet years later, you helped craft the biggest climate legislation this country's ever seen. What changed? The climate?
Never changed at all. Nothing changed. The bottom line is that the cap and trade, I never could get them to commit to using the resources they would have received by charging, you follow me?
Right.
For carbon emissions revenue, to be used for basically fixing the problem. Every country that's ever done it used it for the social reforms. And I can go right into it to present the Inflation Reduction Act, which is what you're talking about. I just had always known that you had to have dispatchable energy. And dispatchable energy is 24/7. Coal was dispatchable, been used as dispatchable for years and years and years, and West Virginia is a big coal-producing state, so I've been very familiar with that. Nuclear, I've always been a big supporter of nuclear, and I thought, it's 24/7. Gas has replaced a lot of coal, and coal was basic. I've told all of my my fellow West Virginians that there's not going to be another coal-fired plant built in America. With that, we had to make a transition. This is in the 80s and 90s. That we had to go to low NOx boilers, scrubbers, bag houses for mercury. And then once we did all that, we found out CO2 is really a big problem. What do you do with that? And Greg, I'll tell you, I don't think this country's ever been committed towards basically finding a solution for CO2. And the reason I'm saying that is I think the people that were just opposed to extraction in itself, that was the only way, because if you found a solution to CO2 that was affordable, if I may say, then they would have been using it more and relying on it more. So that, to me, that was kind of directed towards elimination.
The first type of approach to climate you weren't on board with. So you won that race. That ad was, I think, very effective. And you moved to Washington, and you moved on to a 65-foot trawler called Almost Heaven.
It's a big old steel trawler. No yacht now.
It's not a yacht. Okay, some people, and I heard you say you're not putting down roots, and so you could kind of pull up anchor and get out of Washington as you've done. You start your book talking about a moment where a flotilla of protesters in kayaks pulled up and surrounded your home, and they were pressing you to support President Biden's $3.5 trillion.
They wanted the BBB.
Yeah, Build Back Better plan.
Right, Build Back Better. And let me tell you, the thing I've said in the book was this. I said, when it comes down to it, you have to know where I came from, how I was raised. And I think we're all a product of our environment, of where we came from, how we were raised, and who raised us, Greg. And I was raised in a little coal mining community, Farmington, West Virginia. But people held you to be accountable for your actions and what you said. So I was always trained to understand that my words will have meaning. Those meanings will have actions or reactions, and I'll be responsible. Okay? So be careful. The other thing is that a work element. There's a work element in everything. My grandmother used to take care of anybody who was homeless. She'd keep everybody. She'd feed them, take care of them. She said, I got 3 rules. Can't cuss, can't drink, and you got to work.
And people would show up at your house and stay in the basement.
They would stay in her basement, and she made all those little kids cognizant that people had hard times. But there was rules, so I grew up with rules, and there's nothing wrong with a work rule. And the BBB was giving everything away. It was unfeathered. It was just a total giveaway. And if it would have cost the taxpayers $1, it was a $10 trillion bill. Because Bernie came to me one day, Bernie Sanders. I like Bernie, but we have different values and different ideas as far as policy. And Bernie said, now, Joe, he says, I've cut this down from $6 trillion to $3 trillion. I cut it in half. I said, Bernie, you and I have been here for a long time. Now, you can't BS me, because I know how the system works. Basically, we do everything in 10-year tranches. So you do a bill, you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it and what you want. Well, this is what it would cost over 10 years. This is how we're going to pay for it in 10 years. So you know what you did, Bernie? You cut it from 10 to 5 or down to 3. But you never cut any of the programs you were giving away. And people aren't going to let things go. Perfect example of what we're in, the shutdown. Medical, we expanded, unbelievable, the subsidies.
You did that under the Inflation Reduction Act. You extended the Obamacare subsidies.
I'm the one who put it in a timetable. I said, are you people crazy? You got to fix medical our medical delivery system is broken. You know, we had people, no one understands, if you haven't lived in areas where people are struggling and they're having low incomes and they're fighting and they want to get off of welfare, but they're either on welfare and it kind of holds them in a generational welfare. And as soon as you do, you have a cliff. You hit that one magic number, let's say 25,000. You make $1 over that, you lose all your benefits. And I kept trying to tell them, I says, can't we develop a slope and not a cliff to where you lose it all? Let a person work themselves into a livable wage. Help them as they get to that livable wage. They won't go back, but they can never get ahead. So common sense stuff that I kept trying to tell them, that's how I was raised. I watched people live their lives that way. And the Democratic Party was going so far to the left.
And you famously went on Fox News and said you're a no, you were not backing that bill. And Joe Biden got pretty ticked off at you.
Pretty ticked off at me, but he has a right to get ticked off, but I was ticked off. And I told him this, I said, Mr. President, you and I are the same vintage. You're a little bit older than me. We're the same vintage. I remember John Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I took that literally. I thought we all had to do. It's a wonderful opportunity. Greatest country on earth. Been good to me and my family. What else? What can I do? Public service is the noblest of all professions. I told him, if I vote for this bill, BBB, and you pass it because of my vote, I says, you're changing, and I'm helping you change the psychic of the nation to how much more can my country do for me? There are people today, Greg, still waiting for the next government check.
Right. And at that point, you became vilified by your own party.
Well, it was a party I never recognized. I probably should have left a lot sooner than that. But they're just, the values had changed so much. The Democratic Party I grew up in was, they said, why were you a Democrat, Joe? I said, well, I guess my grandfather was a Democrat, and just kind of a heritage, you inherited this. But the bottom line was, he probably was so thankful that FDR gave him a chance to survive and feed their family and take care of him. And very loyal to that. But you know what? The Democratic Party never tried to tell you what you were supposed to think and accept things that weren't valued. So the social became the big push. Democrats want to start pushing their social values on us. I said, my social value is this. The Constitution, basically, the pursuit of happiness is something we guarantee. Okay, and I said, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I protect your ability to pursue your happiness. Just don't make me believe because you have a certain thing that will basically make you happy that I've got to accept that, or I'm out of the queue, if you will. That's the difference.
And so telling you what pronouns to use and
there
whether
you
use
go.
This word or not that word. Yeah. So there's sort of that purity police, that sort of thing. There's some research lately saying that actually voters pay a lot more attention to identity. Your grandfather, your father, grandfather. It's more about tribe than it is about issues. Do you think Democrats are too hung up on the issue this, issue that? Because there's research saying that people who vote for Trump, they don't really necessarily know what his policy is, but he's kind of a disruptor and he's rich, et cetera. Do you think identity is more important than issues?
Well, we've gotten away from the issues from the stand. Government should be your partner. Government in a capitalist society and the freedoms that we have in the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, what they tried to do, it was never supposed to be your provider. That was not how we were. We were set up a capitalistic entrepreneurial system, okay? But we had the compassion to take care of those who couldn't take care of themselves. Now we've got how do we expand with the pandemic so much that the BBB, we had to continue it. I said, can't we go back to where we were and then look at what had been indexed, how we've normally grown? This is an easy fix. And we're the only country on earth, in this great world of ours, we're the only country that shuts down when we have disputes. Not another country shuts down. They don't shut their doors. Not another business shuts down when they have labor disputes. They all work through it. Not the United States of America. By God, we'll shut down and go home, and we'll still pay the people that's responsible for shutting it down. They're right. The only ones that get paid.
Congress has still been, paid 30? Excuse me. I put out a message on social media asking what I should ask you.
Sure.
Some people got mad at me for even talking with you.
Oh, I know.
How can you platform him, that sort of thing. But one thoughtful person suggested, what do liberals fail to understand about you?
Well, first of all, when you say liberals and how we identify. You're liberal, you're conservative, you're this, you're that. I just said, it's common sense. I said, how do you live your life? You don't live your life in the extremes. There's nothing wrong with being a liberal, and there's nothing wrong with being conservative. But can't you work together to see can you be responsibly, fiscally responsible and be socially compassionate? A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Do you have to be extreme? You have to take me clear to the far left? I can assure you, where AOC, where Bernie, and that's not where the party. They're trying to identify the party as Mondani and all that. That's not where the party's going. That's not where this country is right now, far left. And the country's not truly enamored with the far right. It might be more center right, but it's not there. A lot of things that President Trump has done, people like. They just don't like how he did it and how he continues to enforce it. That's the thing. So I've said this. Why couldn't we just say, the Democrats made a heck of a mistake on the border, opening it up and keeping it porous. Him being tough on the border, Greg, has given President Trump all the cover he needs to do some of these outlandish things. It really has.
There hasn't really been an honest reflection in your former party at what they got wrong in 24, and to have that conversation about what do we get wrong. The border was completely mismanaged. A lot of people thought, oh, you're making it up. You're racist if you say the border's a problem. It's not a problem. It really is a problem for border states. So why is
it's a problem for everybody from a standpoint. First of all, we wouldn't be the country we are today if it wasn't for immigrations. An immigration system that had worked for my ancestors and yours and everybody else's, we would not be this country we are today. You know, we just couldn't be. And look at the countries that have hardly no immigration. They have total closed borders,
right?
And they just basically just disintegrate from within. Okay. Now, 2013, we passed in the Senate a tremendous immigration bill. Tremendous. It was tough.
Right.
But you know what? It was compassionate, but it was tough. So if you've been here for 10, 15, 20, 25 years and you're undocumented, you had a period of time, let's say it's 60 to 90 days, to go to the courthouse, federal courthouse, turn yourself in. You pay a fine of $750 as a misdemeanor because you came here illegally and didn't go through the proper channels. But you've been here. You haven't committed a crime. You're in good standing. You've been working. You've been paying taxes and everything else. Okay, we put you in a queue. You have a chance now to get in the back of the line, but you're going to be a citizen, documented. If you brought a child here with you when the child's a baby or less than 5 years of age, that child is what we call a dreamer. Yeah. They don't know how they got here. You brought them, okay? Why can't they have a fast track to become?
Well, and there was a deal to solve. Langford, Senator Langford had a bill to solve.
James finally, then James as tough as can be, but he saw the compassion. I said, how are you blaming these people? They're serving in our military. They're working as educators and teaching. They're working in our medical system. They're doing everything a good American should do, but yet they're undocumented. That's crazy. Okay. Right. Now, what would have done here, Greg, if that bill would have passed, and let's say those who came here for the really wrong reason and have been basically a detriment to society, they're not going to go to the courthouse and turn themselves in. Now we know who to go after. That's what it should be. And what they're doing now is just kind of gathering everybody. They're all guilty because you come here illegally. We're throwing everybody out. We're throwing school teachers out. We're throwing doctors. We're throwing everybody out. Yeah. That's wrong. And it could be fixed, but that's not the compassion. But, everyone says, what do they know about me? Why a liberal? I'm compassionate. I'll look any way I can to help. But if you're healthy enough to help yourself, I'm going to instill in you, you've got to do something too. You just can't depend on me. We're not going to pass it out like it's candy, okay? You have to earn it. The difference is this. When you hit hard times, we'll be there. And that's what it should be. When you have someone who cannot take care of themselves, we've always been there. But you can't grow as a country if you're going to be capable of participating and don't, because you don't have to.
In early 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine roiled energy markets. You write about a tense encounter with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and he said, write an energy bill. So you did in that year of 2022. So what did you set out to do?
Well, I can tell you, as soon as I saw what happened, okay. Now let's look at the politics we're in. If people want to look at me as if they think Joe's just an opportunist because of politics, if I was an opportunist in my state, it'd been an easy thing to do. Just be a Republican.
Would that have been hard for you? Because
it never entered my mind. I never looked at
people sometimes wondered if you would flip like others have flipped.
They flip. I didn't think that being a D or an R would ever identify who I am as a person. You have to participate. You have to be identified as a D or an R in order to operate in this system we have, which I think is wrong too, and we'll talk about that. But I said, it wouldn't make any difference. The Republicans won't like me any better. I'm not going to kowtow that some of this stuff makes no sense. If I can't go back to my little town that I grew up with, hardworking, good quality people, and explain, I'm not going to vote for it.
And so you shot through the cap and trade bill. Schumer says, write an energy bill. You represent.
He said, write an energy bill. And I said, you got troubles, Chuck. And that's the Ukraine war. I says, Putin has weaponized energy. Mm-hmm. You got our NATO allies. NATO was formed in World War II, at the end of World War II. Its main purpose was only one thing, to prevent another world war. That's it. Well, then that means we all work together. We couldn't even help them because we weren't producing the energy that we should produce. Okay? So I'm thinking, we have got to produce energy because I'll guarantee you, our NATO allies will be looking in all the wrong places for energy.
So you thought U.S. should export natural gas to get Europe off of Russian gas?
Absolutely, but also we should do it clean. We were doing it cleaner and better than anybody in the world. But but the hardcore environmentalists did not want us to do any type of extraction, any type of fossil. Well, that's unrealistic because we have nothing else yet. We're going to have fusion. I believe fusion will be the answer for the future. There's people who don't like nuclear either. We've run our whole military off of it since 1950s, and we've done it very successfully. So I've said, okay, let's look at all the things we can do. So I wrote a bill that I thought was very balanced. My staff worked on it. Nobody knew we were doing it. We did it in secrecy because I wasn't going to go through what I went through with the BBB.
Right.
Okay. And I'm thinking, okay, this might not work because they're not going to like it because it's going to make us produce more energy. We're going to have to produce more oil, more gas. We're going to continue to use our coal, but you have to do it with technology. And I've always said this, Greg, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. No matter how much you think you can, you can't. You can innovate it through technology. Think about today. If we were able to work with India and show them how to use second and third generation of coal-fired plants, they're using them anyway. They're using first generation. There's no bag houses. There's no scrubbers. There's no low NOx boilers. They don't need to. They just want energy, period. They don't care. So I said, okay, let's look at all of the things that we know that can be done. Technology.
And this bill was amazing. It's really more carrots than sticks. It didn't have the same kind of government mandates that the bill you shot the bullet through. And really, there's a lot for nuclear, hydrogen. There's something in there, goodies in there for everyone.
Everything that technology has been, we knew that technology has been proven. It hadn't been matured. Hydrogen, we've had hydrogen forever.
Right.
Never could compete. We had geothermal. And then we had SMRs coming on.
Small modular reactors. It's basically a tax bill. And if you did a blind taste test, it's a lot of things Republicans would love, and yet no Republicans voted for it.
That's because we used a reconciliation. Because Schumer believed that basically we don't need the Republicans, do it yourself. I said, you're crazier than hell, Chuck. This system in the Senate was designed for the minority participation.
Are you saying you could have got it 60 votes to get the IRA through?
I can tell you that bill that I wrote in the IRA had as much Republican input as a Democratic input.
Right, reads like a Republican bill in a lot of ways.
Because I'd worked with him for 5 years in my committee.
So you're saying that reconciliation was a mistake. If it had gone for an actual vote, it might still be standing today because Republicans wouldn't have tried to tear it down because they would have been part of it.
That's exactly. And the biggest mistake I made is calling it the IRA. I should have called it the Energy Security Act of 2022.
Right, that confuses everybody. The IRA does.
Well, the IRA was this. Inflation, think about this. When we did the bill, when they finally called me and said, you have anything? I said, I got something. I said, you're not going to like it because you're going to have to produce more energy than you ever produced. And you don't want to produce anything. You want leases. You won't give leases out. You won't do anything. You want no oil. You want no gas. You want to shut down all the coal plants. I said, you're not going to like what I'm going to do. But what I have done is give you a balanced bill that we can produce what we need, we can help our allies, and we can basically develop the energy we want for the future. And we can only do that through technology, and we're doing it. But you have to incentivize. But they just couldn't, and they just wanted to accelerate what they wanted and hell with what they didn't want. And that's where we went in.
And, that bill, had a lot of healthcare and tax provisions in there. In order to raise the money, there was, increasing baseline corporation, 15% tax, extended the Affordable Care Act subsidies. There's
I thought everybody was paying 15% because the tax rate went from 35 to 21. And I said, well, let's just put a floor at 15 to make sure no one slides under us.
Right. And that was a global effort.
They went nuts.
Yeah, there was a global effort to have a 15 floor.
They went nuts on that. So, no, corporations weren't paying 2, 4, 6, 8%.
0 in some cases.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that was a good bill. It really was. But like I said, you said, why did you call it that? IRA. Inflation was at 9% when they called me. The President Biden's ratings were down into the 20s, low 20s.
Eesh.
Gas was at $5.
Yeah.
As soon as we passed that bill, immediately everything started coming down. Gas went back down to the 3-4 range, okay, and the 3.50 and the 3. Inflation came from 9 to 6 to 3. And so it did what it was supposed to do because we were producing. And on top of that, what you're saying about we used the carrot, not the stick. When I shot the cap and trade, all they had was a stick. They just wanted you to pay into it, and they were going to disperse the money how they wanted. So I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, politicians like to be able to decide where money's going to go.
But Greg, here's what happened. I did not know how far-reaching that bill, the IRA, had. And I was in a meeting in France, in Paris, at the IEA, International Energy Association. I was given a meeting there, and both Macron and Schultz came after me. You're destroying my country. I said, what? They said, you're destroying our country. You're taking all of our investments out. People are going to America now.
There was, because of the incentives, a lot of money came into the U.S. What's it like to see this all dismantled now? Not only the healthcare provisions.
Well, it's wrong. It's so short-sighted from that standpoint because basically if they'd have just stuck with the bill, but what happened, the Democrats couldn't accept the bill the way it was because it didn't let them accelerate what they wanted. I wanted to get off. I didn't want to give the car manufacturers 1 penny of rebate. Okay? And I used analogy. I don't believe that we built the gas stations for Henry Ford when he had the Model T. Okay? It wasn't the government's part. The economy, if you believe in the market, it'll take over. We never give car manufacturers. That started in 2008, 2009 with the crash, try to save the car industry.
That was a big bailout.
That was a big bailout, okay? But they got most of their money back because they took stock. I understand all of that. So I said, listen, if this is the best product in the world, people will buy it. But I said, you want $7,500? The only way I'd do $7,500 if we didn't have to rely on China. So I said, fine, $3,750 if we basically secure the process, we secure it and do the processing. And then if we do the manufacturing, the other $3,750 in America or in an allied country that we had free trade agreements with, so we could rely on the supply chain. Oh, they said, sure, we sign up. As soon as we signed the bill, they cut everything in half again. You could not trust them. Now, and I told the president, I said, your people and you, Mr. President, let them do this, and it's wrong because we're still going to be relying on China. My only reason to sign this bill was to get off of China, or that we were depending on them. But when I told Schultz and I told Macron, I said, guys, listen, don't be mad at me. We never had a meeting where we said, what can we do to harm our allies? We were afraid we couldn't help you all. But here's the thing, sir. You've used a stick. You have been having carbon pricing forever, and you don't have anything to show for it. You have no new technology, and basically you've expanded all your social programs with the money you got. We're using basically the carrot to find the problems for the future generation of new energy. That was mine, and it was working. It would work.
Right, and the EV incentives. No one was forced to buy an EV compared to no one was forced to buy an EV. It was an inducement, and the fossil fuel companies get lots of depletion allowances and lots of tax goodies. So it's not like
they've all sucked off the trough.
So it's not like this EV tax credit was the only thing. You talked about being compassionate and having empathy. And there's certainly a lack of that right now. Cruelty that's happening, taking away food from hungry people and healthcare, et cetera. And regarding, your father's struggles quitting smoking, you write that true empathy can only be learned the hard way. I'd like to ask you about empathy arising from a difficult experience, traumatic experience in your life. When you were 10 years old, you started working in your grandfather's store, stocking shelves. One day when you were in college, that store burned to the ground, and you showed up and your papa told you about seeing a salesman. And
we lost 3 customers and a salesperson.
And a child burned. And, how did you feel going through that? And how did that affect you losing?
We lost everything. We had nothing. We had an insurance. I'll never forget, my dad thought he had insurance on everything, and he trusted an insurance salesman.
Yeesh.
And when the store burnt, the insurance salesman left town, never seen again.
Wow.
We lost. So we had nothing. And we started with nothing. So I quit school, went back to home, back to Farmington, tried to help my dad and my grandfather and everything. My grandfather was determined to open a grocery store back up. And it was an old bank. It was a closed bank. It was close right next door. So I'll never forget, I was in there helping him. We were dynamiting the safe, trying to blow the safe out in the middle of the bank in order to build his store again. I'll never forget that.
And he put a bunch of the money on the table and said, whatever people need, take it?
My dad told me, my dad and my mother for the first time had gone on a vacation. When the store burnt down, he came back. We were there, and he said, Joe, he called before he got home. He says, go up and see if you can find the safe and see if I think we have a little bit of money, not much. He said, whatever we have. So that night, I'm crawling up through the rubble, trying to find the safe that fell down through the floor. And I finally found the safe. I got into it, and I got a box in there, and I didn't know what was in it. So I took it home, and Dad opened it up, and I think there had to be maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 in it. And he called all the employees in. He put the money on the table. He said, take what you need.
Wow. And you said nobody was greedy. Everybody
took exactly what they needed. No more. I've watched all of that, and people don't know that part. And they think, but I've watched people pick themselves up. I cannot believe that in this great country of ours, with all the opportunities, we can't find people to work.
But let's stick with it. The loss. Right now in this country, the Trump administration is trying to disband or shrink FEMA, which helps people when things burn down. Those of us in the American West have seen a lot of fires. Paradise, Los Angeles, Altadena, and people are losing everything. And climate change is accelerating these fires. They are hotter, they are fiercer, they are faster, it is warmer. Firefighters will say, this is not like any fire we've ever seen. Sure. So I'm curious how you can think about compassion for the thousands of people in the American West who went through what you went through.
Yeah. No, you have compassion. The bottom line is, climate has an effect on everything. It has an effect on people that lose their jobs. It has an effect on the climate itself, how it affects people, every way, shape, and form. That has to be balanced out. Sometimes we swing too far one way, too far the other. And there's a balance to be had, okay? And you have people that are deniers. I said, let me tell you, every one of us is responsible for the climate. We have had a part in playing it, and we have a responsibility. And we have the ability with technology and our abilities to find ways to cure this and to live in harmony if you can. That's our responsibility. But you just can't flip it overnight. What happens, you have the rebellion that happened when Barack Obama came in 2008, got elected, took office in 2009. Remember the war on coal? Mm-hmm. The only thing that they said there was a war, we've gone through everything that they asked as far as, and these are the people back home that were working in the coal mines. They said they put scrubbers on. They changed the sulfur content and things of this sort, lost their jobs when all the things were basically demanding different product to be used. Went through all of that, and all of a sudden, here he comes and says, well, we're going to just go all to renewables, or what they believed. He never considered all the people that worked, that basically produced the energy that saved this country, that built, made the steel, that built the guns and ships and everything else. These people were diehard patriots. And I'm going to tell you what I want to explain to you, Greg. You want to know why the political shift had happened? He was basically putting benchmarks that were not feasible.
But oil and gas production soared in this country under Barack Obama, not because of him, because of frackers, right?
Fracking came in. Yeah,
fracking came in, but the oil, U.S. became the Saudi Arabia, outpaced.
We
Saudi.
were able to, yeah.
We produced Obama doesn't, sometimes they'll talk about that, but oil and gas production, not so sure about coal, increased under Obama.
Well, the technology was using some. I was living in the coal area, so I can only speak about that. But the technology, what the benchmarks they wanted us to hit, you couldn't because technology wasn't there to let you hit it. And when Barack Obama said, "Go ahead and build a coal-fired plant, we'll break you," he knew the technology wasn't there for carbon capture sequestration that was cost-effective. They knew that, and so what we went through all that. The only thing I'm trying to say is this: there's not going to be, coal has basically been segued out of the market. Coal right now, the only reason justification for coal, because it's a 24/7 dispatchable fuel. They can run 24/7, and they still need it for the energizing the grid. We know that we're going to demand more energy than ever before. And you know what's going on. You see it, hear it.
With AI, it's going to change that. Though in California, 2,000 people a week install solar with batteries. Now batteries can be dispatchable power in a way that
it's only 4, 5, 6 hours.
Short term, there's some duration. So
the duration. So I tell people, if you want to do everything renewables right now, tell us what 5 to 7 hours a day you want your energy, because you have to have the backup of renewables. I mean, of the.
Well, California is doing that now in terms of like with the batteries have saved California's bacon recently with some really hot summers, et cetera. And batteries, the nice thing about batteries is if you can tap into people's cars, you don't have to have expensive grid. You know, it's like the government doesn't have to pay, or the utility companies don't have to build the infrastructure.
Well, here's another thing, Greg.
If I can tap into your EV.
We have a new Form Energy is in Weirton, West Virginia, building the biggest batteries. They're iron batteries. They can go over 1,000 megawatts for 100 hours. They can back up an energy, a utility plant. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we're going, this is what we did with the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act. We were trying to have all these new technologies. We were trying to accelerate what we call maturing. So they would be matured enough to be able to carry the energy for the future.
So let's talk about that. You grew up in a coal mining community, you said, idolizing coal miners for their hard and dangerous work. West Virginia has about 20,000 people directly employed in coal mining. Industry says there's another 70,000 indirect jobs.
Yeah.
Excuse me. West Virginia has also around 11,000 clean energy jobs last year. It's one of the fastest growing states in the country in terms of clean energy. So, talk about that transition, that storage grid.
Well, we were doing everything right. We were going in the right direction as we transitioned. And then when the Trump administration comes in and starts cutting that down to the point where some of these things that we were trying to make happen.
Cutting the Inflation Reduction Act and
cutting a lot of
of
the incentives. And I would say that, and I told my Republican friends, I said, just change the name of the bill. Use the contents of what's in there, because I can tell you it was done in a balanced way.
Right.
Change the name, take ownership of it, and we're fine. We'll be praising you.
And a lot of these clean energy investments that happened from the Inflation Reduction Act
went into the red states.
And so they're voting against their own interest of their own constituents. How's that going to?
I don't know.
Explain that to me.
Well, I'm trying to tell you. That's why I try to tell the political parties. The social agenda pushes more people than what you think their economy or anything else would put. You would think that they would be voting their pocketbook or be voting basically what's best interest for them and their family. They're voting social issues. They either like you or don't like you, and you're trying to force a way of life they don't believe in.
It used to be that people like you were sort of or conservative. The right center was sort of fiscally conservative and socially progressive or liberal.
Compassionate. Yeah.
Now that's flipped, and Trump has figured out that his people are socially conservative and fiscally liberal. We can spend trillions on tax cuts and let the money flow.
A funny thing, I say this in the book, it says it too. My grandfather asked him one time, I said, Papa, what's the difference between a Democrat and Republican? And he said, Joe, he says, not that much, honey. He said, trust me, you put a pile of money in the middle of the table, they'll both spend it all. Now, our Republican friends will feel bad about it, but they'll both spend it all. They don't even feel bad about it anymore. No one feels bad about it. No one cares about $38 trillion of debt and what it's doing to our country.
Right. And so and there's also a lot of climate risks and debt that's coming in the future that we're not really paying for.
Well, and people, I know I can just say the development along oceans and things of this sort, Outer Banks. I have a lot of friends, and I love to go out to Outer Banks and
good TV show, by the way. Yeah,
I'd love to do that. Ocracoke's my favorite place, way out there. But they're in a very climate-prone area. I mean, things happen, and you got to be careful. And things are happening everywhere.
And fossil fuels are a primary reason for doing that, because the reality is we don't pay the true cost of fossil fuels, right? We don't, what economists call externalities, right? Something happens, we burn fossil fuels, and bad things happen somewhere else. I don't pay that direct cost, and that's part of what Waxman-Markey was trying to do.
Well, let me ask you this: how are people reacting to what Bill Gates has kind of been saying lately, and saying we have to take more consideration of the human element within climate too?
That's created quite a stir in conversation. Yeah. And his foundation gave a couple $1 million to this guy, Bjorn Lomborg, who's been out there for a long time saying, it's got a little bit of false choice. Oh, we need to address malaria because more people die from malaria right now than other things. Yeah. Though, United Scientific American reported that a staggering number of premature deaths, 460,000, were attributable to coal-fired power plant pollution from 2000 to 2020.
In America or in the United States or in the world?
I'm not sure about it. Was U.S. So 460,000 coal-fired power plants we know creates particulates that sends kids with asthma to the.
But most of all the coal-fired plants today are not in America.
Right,
they're in Asia.
It's right, and they're expanding in Asia, and coal has been expanding.
Yeah.
So
because, they're going to use what we did. They're going to use what's in their backyard. And the thing about it is we're not giving them any incentive to change and do something different. So if you are, that's, you talk about tariffs. Tariffs should be an incentive, not a penalty. We shouldn't penalize people with tariffs. It should be an incentive to do things right. Use technology. And if we have developed technology, you want to use the technology we've used, whether it's going to be renewables or whether it's going to be low carbon emissions because of our technology, then we would give you an incentive to our markets if you would basically use this new technology as you produce power. Those are the things you could be doing. We're not doing any of that.
Right. And so there's a whole, I don't quite understand where markets are today in this country because we have a government that's like taking direct equity in companies and very much actively involved in the way that, someone like Ronald Reagan would say, there's no way the government should be involved in the way the economy the way they are today. You call yourself a compassionate capitalist. American support for capitalism hit the lowest point since Gallup began measuring it. When they asked if people had a favorable image of capitalism off the top of their head, 54% of Americans recently said yes. That's down from 61% 15 years ago. Yeah. How do you see the state of capitalism?
Capitalism has to be available to everybody. When people think they're left out of the market, I'm behind. I'll never be able to have a better life. I'll never be able to afford a house. I'm not. That's things happen to the haves and have-nots. A tax system should be a reward and incentive. You should reward those who basically worked hard, innovate, create, take risks, boom, boom, boom. But on the other hand, you shouldn't reward them to the point that it's a detriment to those who are trying to climb that ladder. That's why the balance is so far out that when I'm to the point now where I almost believe a flat rate tax without playing all these games you want to play and all the offsets and everything.
Steve Forbes went around the country trying to pitch that for quite a while.
He wasn't all that wrong, I'll tell you. But then there's an awful lot of people that don't pay any taxes. I understand that end of it too. And they're thinking, well, why are we caring, And I said, well, first of all, there should be some type of a progressive tax to the point where everyone pays something, whether it's 1%, 2% or something, pay something. Because without any value, if you don't pay something into this great country and this experiment that we can govern ourselves and run the place, then you have no ownership whatsoever.
Right, but there's a situation now where so few people have a tremendous amount of wealth, they don't really have a lot of income. During the last year, the top 10 Americans, their wealth has increased by $700 billion.
There's no excuse.
$700 billion in 1 year. And people look at that, you can understand why people are voting for Mamdani or saying this is rigged.
No, I understand.
This is not the capitalism of the 1980s.
Bernie and I agree on a lot of things. And that's one of them, income inequality. Something's wrong when you have disproportion of worker, what they're making. Just take 30, 40 years ago. The ratio of difference of what CEO and a worker made.
Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary, and he's been saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't offer any solutions.
But what politician's ever going to run, except Mamdani, saying it's hard to get elected saying I'm going to raise your taxes. That's not a popular campaign platform.
Well, you say you want fairness in the tax system. The system's not fair. It's just not fair. This 2017 tax cut, I didn't vote for it then. I didn't think it was fair then. I didn't think it's fair to extend it now.
Could we go back to even Obama or even Clinton era taxes?
Forget Obama. Clinton is the only one under Erskine Bowles and John Kasich. They were the architects under Newt Gingrich at that time, John Kasich working in the Congress. They were in the majority. And you had Erskine Bowles who was running it for President Clinton. They put a tax plan together that not only was fair, it basically spun off balanced budgets, surpluses, and we'd have been debt-free by 2006.
And Clinton left with a surplus, right?
So it produced surpluses 4 years. We were at $6 trillion and going down in debt. And there were people afraid, oh, my God, if we're debt-free in this country, what are we going to do? They were afraid of that, some of the top people. And then what happened is we had 9/11 happen, declared 2 wars never paid for, first time we ever done that, and the extensions. And then then we went like from going this direction, 6 trillion, then like a rocket shot up to 10 trillion, and it kept going. And then you had Obama come in. I was there. They could have basically just said nothing and allowed the tax, what we called the Bush tax credits. They had, 2 tax credits under Bush.
Tax cuts.
Tax cuts. That's right. They had 2 tax cuts under Bush. They could have let those go back. Just don't say a word.
Right.
Oh, no. He had to say, anybody making less than $250,000 will not be affected. Okay. And then Biden comes in. Anybody making less than $400,000 won't be affected. We're all affected. Okay. But then the Republicans come in and give, well, we'll give more tax break because these people are still, they didn't get that break at 400,000 or 250. The bottom line is there's no fairness to the system, and there's no rhyme or reason how we can have disproportionately the wealthiest people living in one country.
And I think we're never going to solve climate until we sort of get that democracy right because of the concentration of wealth and the concentration of power. And we talk about the invisible costs of the national debt. There's also a lot of invisible costs of climate. And so if we don't fix our democracy, you're now out of the game. What do you hear from people inside about how to fix the system of talking to each other, like Erskine Bowles in the 90s? That's like a different planet.
You had Simpson-Bowles Act. Remember, they tried to basically say we're going to get our finances in order. They couldn't get that done. They worked their butts off on it. It was a wonderful piece of legislation.
Right.
I support them wholeheartedly. There's some tough things in there, okay, and everyone would have had to just hang on there and get through this because putting the financial risk of our country where we are right now. I'll never forget in 2011, I'm sitting in Armed Services Committee, and then in Armed Services Committee, here comes my first committee meeting, and we had all the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Mike Mullen, Admiral Mullen, was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, asking what's the greatest threat the United States of America faces. I'm thinking he's going to talk about military, whether it be China's aggression, Russia, or Iran, North Korea. They're all weaponized with nuclear, and what we're going to do. He said, don't worry about another country taking us over militarily. We'll take ourselves down because of the debt of a nation. And he was right. Most nations have fallen because of debt. Roman Empire fell.
So
They've
how
all fall.
Concerned are you about the course of this nation right now?
I'm more worried than I've ever been in the history of my life that I can think back on, and all the history that I've read about. I'm more concerned now. We got too much misinformation. We're not doing anything to reel in the social platforms. We're not holding them accountable whatsoever for what they put on. Anybody can go on there anonymously and say anything they want to. And unless you hold those platforms that give you a voice and give you a place to get your voice out, you shouldn't be able to say First Amendment, Constitution, freedom of speech. You can't say anything you want.
But those companies are now building this east wing of the White House.
They're building that. And how about AI? You think the Internet's been dangerous at times? There's been an awful lot of good that was done by the Internet. An awful lot of economy was done by the Internet. A lot of damage has been done also. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what AI could do to us.
And it's a climate time bomb too. The energy suck of AI is going to be.
So we're gonna and we've got to find a way to harness this, and it's just everyone has to figure out. Okay, I'm an American. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an American. You might have different ideas of how you want to govern yourself, and whether it's a momdami, everyone's scared to death. They're trying to put that's the face of what's going to happen. Once the people have spoken, and the process is our democracy is formed on our founding fathers thinking we could govern ourselves. Well, by governing yourself, you either have to run yourself and say, I know what my citizens want, or you have to elect somebody that you want to represent you. The people have spoken. The people of New York have spoken. Let's give this man a chance. I wouldn't have voted for him, but let's give him a chance. Yeah. I will do everything I could now. If he would call me and say, Joe, what do you think about this? I want him to succeed, but I would speak truth to power, okay? So I'm not rooting for him to fail. I'm rooting for anybody that gets elected through the process to succeed. So when I'm in the Senate, I'm not opposed to anybody. You got a problem. You're representing Nebraska, Kansas, whoever you're representing. I want to help you, but let's work together. I can't harm the people I represent by helping you unless we find out, is there a balance to be had? They're not even having this discussion anymore, Greg. They're not sitting down. That boat of mine, that boat was the only, that was the only safe haven that we had, that I could bring people down and have dinner and make them sit there and we talk to each other. I saw things happen on that boat. We made more legislation there than we made in the Capitol. So Almost Heaven was truly a respite to where you could go and be able to speak, be who you wanted to be, and speak to people you couldn't speak to because you were guilt by association. Then you become guilt by conversation, and you were afraid to be seen working with the other side. Right. That's not the other side. That's not the enemy on the other side. I can tell you where the enemies are. And it's not the Republican Party, or if you're a Republican, it's not the Democratic Party. This is the way you can solve the problems in America. Your enemies are outside. They want you to fail. They want to do harm to you. And as long as you keep all this discourse going on, they figure they're doing a pretty good job.
Well, Arnold Schwarzenegger proposed on Bill Maher, who I think you may have helped get him there because you were on Bill Maher.
How'd you know that?
Well, your daughter Heather gave a little bit of insight.
Okay, yeah. Well, I kept telling Bill Maher, kept saying I can't get Arnold on. And I just had lunch with Arnold, and then I said Arnold, I said Bill wants to get you on. He says, yeah. No. He says, oh sure. I don't know whether he just wasn't a fan or what it was, but then eventually I said, Bill, call him. They'll do it. He'll do it.
And they're kind of shocked. But on his show, on the Maher show, Schwarzenegger proposed kind of a grand bargain for our democracy. I'm wondering what you think of this. 1, Election Day is a national holiday.
Good.
2, redistricting commissions to draw congressional maps so politicians don't choose their voters.
And one step further than that, it should be computer driven first, but still have the human touch to it. Okay, by the commission. If the commission's within 3% of what the absolute perfect computer model shows it should be, then you're good. If you're outside that window, go back and do it again.
So checking the people. And number 3, which I think is a hard one for national voter ID, which is a hard one for the left. So that's 2 things that the left would love. One thing that the left would.
I'm 78 years old and I still have to show ID. What is wrong with showing an ID?
I think that civil liberties organizations are a little wary of a national ID and how that can be used.
You're not saying a national ID. Just show your ID. You got a driver's license. Okay, don't drive. You got a birth certificate. Okay. You have a work, Social Security. Show something that you're here. There's nothing wrong with that. I think they're crazy as hell, and they wonder why people don't agree. They got to have an ID to buy a bottle of beer, but not to go vote.
Right, I guess. Right, yeah, I mean, I guess the left is very.
Well, that's a far left. That's a far
voter
far
fraud does not happen in this country in a meaningful way.
You want to know why West Virginia changed? And I'm talking about they went from 75% registered Democrats to 80% registered Republicans in a 10-year period. You want to know the reason?
Why?
They all told me. This is union workers, United Mine workers. This is factory workers. These are workers.
Former stronghold of the Democrats.
That was it. They were the strongest of the stronghold of Democratic Party. They said, Joe, the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C. spends more effort, more resources, and more time with people that are able-bodied, capable of working, that don't work or won't work than those of us who do, and the hell with them.
But that's sort of this myth of the makers and the takers, like the welfare queen.
The only thing I can do is tell you what they believe.
I have an alternative theory, which is how the Democratic Party got astray, which is there's an industry of consultants who make a ton of money off of candidates and with polls and consultants and steer people in a certain way. And their interest is not necessarily, their interest is in revenue.
I grew up in the 50s and 60s with a Democratic Party that basically cared about, do you have a good job? Is it safe where you're going to work? Are you getting paid properly? Do you have benefits? All the things that we needed to basically have a quality of life, that's what they cared about. They didn't care about who you loved. They didn't care about any of this other. They got to the point now where they're trying to be almighty and tell us everything. I said, you have a sexual preference. I don't care about any of that. But just don't make me believe I'm supposed to believe it too.
That's one of the great things when you did a conversation with David Axelrod at the Commonwealth Club where we're based, and he said that Democrats approach people in other parts, coastal Democrats approach people in other parts of the country like sociologists. I'm here to help you become more like me. And I know Appalachia.
I have a friend, Chuck Smith, a dear friend of mine. He lived up in Holland. He grew up in a poor area. Supposedly, he didn't know he was poor. He says, Joe, we lived in Clay County up in Holland here. And he says, you know what? He says, one day in the early 60s, they come up here and they were doing surveys. And they wonder how much my mother made or my father. Does your mother work? No, she's a homemaker. Does your father, well, he's a janitor at the school, makes $2,500 a year. He says, Joe, we had garden, we had a milk cow, we had butchering hogs, we had everything. We were all, and everybody in that hollow lived that way. He says by the time they got done going up the hollow and coming back down and told her that we lived in abject poverty, the hollow went to hell in a handbasket. This man grew up to be very successful in life. He says, I can remember it's plain as day. I'm 10 years old. They're telling us we're poor. We thought we were in good shape. We all lived the same. We were doing pretty good. We had all we wanted to eat. We canned everything. We kept everything. We butchered our own, did everything on our own. But Dad didn't make enough money for their eyes that we were right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a shame, isn't it?
So
war on poverty was not a war. It was war reversed on us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that Appalachia thinks that's sort of a sacrifice zone. America doesn't
care about it.
First of all,
John Kennedy, thank God, we got highways, we got connectivity. He saw the abject poverty up close
and Bobby Kennedy even more so.
Yes, and when John Kennedy ran in 1960 for president, and that if it wasn't for West Virginia, he'd have never gotten elected president. He had to beat Hubert Humphrey there because of his religion. Religion was a big factor at that time, and we're the least diverse state in the nation. We're the whitest state in the nation, and we're the least Catholic state in the nation. And I'm an ethnic Catholic. My family's background is Italy and Czechoslovakia, and we're Catholic. And
you got lots of Catholic guilt, I know.
Yeah, I told Barack Obama one time, he said, Joe, my demographics don't work well in your state. And I said, Barack, my demographics don't work well in my state. But if they get to know you, they're the greatest people on earth. Just come and spend a little time.
Well, I appreciate your ability and willingness to talk to people across divides. I wish we had more of that in this country.
Yeah.
Because it's tearing us apart.
And I've told people on climate or anything they want to talk about, I said, listen, we can find areas of how we're moving. First of all, to go after me the way they have, and then to see that I was the only one that was able to write a bill that gave them more of a pathway forward, that we had a chance to transition into a clean energy policy portfolio. I want clean water. I want clean air. I want everything. But I want people to have a job, and as we transition, you don't leave them behind. When you leave a person behind, you say, well, we're just going to change. Well, what about me? This is where I grew up. This is where I live. I raised my kids. Can we not find something here for us? And I will give Joe Biden credit. He gave credits as we transition out. You bring a company in to a coal area or where you're trying to transition. He gave us incentives to move the needle, if you will.
Joe Manchin is a former U.S. Senator from West Virginia and author of the new book, Dead Center in Defense of Common Sense.
It tells it all.
Thank you, Senator Manchin, for coming on Climate One.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be with you.